Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, September 29th, 2021, and we have quite a bit of news to cover today. Now, I do want to get ahead of get ahead of the mini narrative or, speculation people have been discussing. There have been some people that have been saying, and we do appreciate it very, very genuinely. Dave, Camden, you guys are looking tired and stuff like that. For those that are not on audio, that are on YouTube, you may notice I look a little fatigued today, maybe not, but the only reason is because we've been honestly just grinding our asses off. So yeah, we may take a 24-hour break, take a little bit of a breather, but it's honestly it's good exhaustion in the sense that we love doing this. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. So first off, Biden could fine firms up to $700,000 if they fail to mandate vaccines, according to a vaccine enforcement mechanism that is part of the $3.5 trillion Build Back Better bill, according to the Daily Mail. I knew this was coming. I think a lot of you did too. I don't know what else I could say about that. The next thing is that Japan's ex-foreign minister Fumio Kishida is set to be the new prime minister after winning the, winning the leadership of his party. Sure. I mean, as long as it's democratically done and it goes and abides by their rules, I'm not one to comment or speculate on Mr. Kishida. I'm not sure of his background, if he's controversial or not, but, we'll see what happens. The next thing is that Russia threatens to block YouTube nationwide as it eyes measures against the Deutsche Welle after YouTube took down RT's German language channels. The Kremlin urges, quote, zero tolerance, end quote, according to Reuters and a few other outlets. Let them do it. It's their country. They have the right to do it. And I'm not saying that out of spite. I mean, I know there's a lot of controversy around YouTube. Speaking of which, just to add to that, it's been recently announced in the last handful of hours, that YouTube will be removing any anti-beep boop, you know what I mean, the word that starts with a V, or any, I think, content even questioning it, to be honest. So look, here's the thing. In pure technicality, they're a private company. They could do what they want. Some people have already reached out to us saying, hey, Camden, Dave, you guys concerned about your channel? As you know, folks, we've always been very delicate to sort of dance around that. So I don't think we're in any trouble. We should be more than fine. With that being said, apparently the purge already happened and we weren't a part of it, and thank the lucky stars. So the next thing is that and also, sorry, by the way, this is why we encourage the Patreon so much. It's not so much to do with the financial aspect. It's more that we can speak so freely, which, by the way, members, there's an early release and new members episode, both that came out in the last handful of hours. The next thing is that 6 out of 7, or 86% of the people that died of COVID-19 yesterday in New South Wales, Australia, were fully or partially vaccinated. Yeah, this is not, I mean, here's the thing. This is nothing new. This is nothing new per se. Yeah, I don't know what, I understand that Australia also banned any, not just independent media, but mainstream media using drones to film aerial footage of in Sydney, if I'm not mistaken, and certain other parts of Australia. I'm not sure if it was done at a federal level or a nationwide level, but or scale. But I mean, if that doesn't show you how they're trying to cover things up, I don't know what does. I mean, I'm seeing videos all over the place of seemingly not out of context videos, by the way, of officers arresting mothers on the street who are going for a walk with their child in outdoors because the mother doesn't have a mask on. I'm seeing more and more, whether it's YouTube comments, Twitter posts, Reddit posts, even honestly, even the odd Facebook post I'm seeing when I do go on to promote the show and stuff like that. People saying they're thinking of moving countries. I mean, I am too. I truly, truly am. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but ultimately, I do think the next, say, 3 to 5 months are going to be very telling. I mean, has been reported that Slovenia actually just banned, as of today, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because a 20-year-old died a handful of, I think, 2 or 3 weeks after his vaccination, and the medical officials and experts, I say that carefully, but in Slovenia have said that the vaccine benefits still outweigh the risks, but again, specifically as it pertains to Johnson & Johnson, at least for now, no more, not allowed. The next thing is that 16% of New York State's hospital workers are not fully vaccinated. Thus, over 83,000 are at risk of termination after Governor Kathy Hochul's mandate went into effect yesterday. Did you hear her the other day? there's I don't want to say leaked, I guess it was meant to be public, of her speaking at a congregation or church, if I'm not mistaken, saying, Jesus or God, it was something along the lines of, Jesus or God delivered these vaccines and I need you to be my apostles. Holy crap, you just replaced one jackass governor with another one. I don't even need to get started on that. You folks know where I'm going to go with that. The next topic, part of my explicitness here, is that the trend hashtag fuck Joe Biden was trending on Twitter. And interestingly enough, within maybe an hour and a half tops, 90 minutes, give or take, it was quietly replaced with hashtag fuck Donald Trump. I'm not joking. Not joking at all. And we've seen this happen. If you try and refresh the trending page on Twitter, if you're in the mood, which I normally never do. I never do it actually, but I've seen some people do it before, where if you just sit there for, an hour or two and you check the Twitter trending page, a topic will come and then it'll disappear. Now people could argue, they say, Dave, that, there's hundreds of millions of tweets being sent out there every day. So of course things fluctuate. Yes, but it's very ironic that whenever there's something that is trending as it pertains to calling out anyone on the Democratic side of things, where, it's interesting to see where the interests align, right? And the way that those things disappear and quickly reappear with a total opposite trend. I mean, when you think about it, we can argue very strongly, and there's evidence to suggest very strongly as well. I think Glenn Greenwald, don't quote me on this, but I believe Mr. Greenwald brought this up as well a handful of weeks ago, that, Twitter, big tech, basically it's a quid pro quo. They've made an off-the-record deal, I don't even think enshrined on paper per se, with the government. The government's not going to regulate them as long as these big tech guys do and censor the way that the government wants them to, right? The next thing is that Joe Rogan has posted a video likening the boop bop, the thing that starts with a V, the mandates, to the Holocaust. Okay, it's very polar. Look, here's the thing. I don't think he cares. For people who say like, oh, what is Joe Rogan, like, what's he doing? I don't think he cares. You know what I mean? I understand his deal and his contract stipulates with Spotify, he has to keep up a certain amount of viewers in order for him to get his full $100 million amount, assuming he was not paid the $100 million up front, right? I also think, though, that, again, he claims that's why he moved to Spotify, and that's what they promised him. Again, it depends what the contract says and what have you, but that's on the angle of people saying, is Joe Rogan going to be removed from Spotify, right? As it pertains to what he's saying, his point, as I interpret it, this is my opinion, and if you guys see it a different way, please let me know. I believe he is, and I'm not trying to defend him, but I think the main point is that he is saying, if you give the government, especially nowadays, an inch, they take a mile. And to exploit, and they use that exploitation as justification, quote unquote, very similar to what happened with the Patriot Act, right? And we now know through the Snowden leaks, the Patriot Act didn't do much relative to the other terrorist operations and things like that, right? So again, it's I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to debate this more, to be honest, either with myself in my own head or with others, but we'll see what happens there. The next thing is the regarding the whole, this is my own personal opinion, but this whole thing about the debt ceiling debacle and the government shutdown and all that crap, it's all a show. It's all a show. I mean, it's a show. A quick example, if we take a look at AOC voting present, I know this has nothing to do with the infrastructure bill, but if we look at AOC voting present on funding Israel with the Iron Dome, you could see shortly before she voted present, I believe she was going to vote no, but even if she voted no, it still would have passed, because I believe 3/4 of the House passed that bill, voted to pass it. But you can see footage from C-SPAN of Nancy Pelosi giving shit to AOC before she goes to vote, and AOC's trying to brush it off and not make it seem like it's such a big scene that Pelosi's making, because AOC is, while Pelosi's yelling at her, AOC's waving, oh, hi to like her fellow Congress members as they walk by. It's a show, just like when Kamala Harris gave props to Lindsey Graham. It's a show. I'm not saying Pelosi yelling at AOC was a show. You could see Pelosi basically saying, you gotta vote, you gotta give this to Israel, do not basically that whole thing of Mama Bear, as they call it, controls the progressive squad, if you will. That's clearly, it started as a joke, but clearly that's what's happened. AOC, and then she made a whole Twitter post defending her vote on present. She didn't answer the question. She didn't address it. There's no word salad in the world that could address it, that could really sort of dance around certain questions in certain contexts, and this was one of them, if you ask me, right? The next thing is that, according to NPR, a paradox-free time travel is theoretically possible, researchers say. What I say to that is propaganda, in the sense of dissemination, drop feeding, right? The next thing is that Stephen Harper, former Canadian Prime Minister, he was known in Canada, from my understanding, as he wasn't very well liked, but he also wasn't extremely hated. Don't get me wrong, there's always people that hate and like certain elected officials, but he told the line fairly well with respects to the federal budget and things like that, allegedly, right? That's, it's not for me to say firmly what it was as if it's fact, but he is now taking major heat in Canada because he is getting involved with a company that's looking to arrange the sale of surveillance technology to the United Arab Emirates. And again, you look at the UAE's track record on, ethics and human rights and things like that. Look, he's a private citizen now. I guess in theory he could do what he wants, but in reality we know that, again, he made his connections in politics. I am certain of that. If not, how did he make his connections through that? With the UAE, working at McDonald's, So it obviously was in politics, but by the way, no disrespect to anyone working at McDonald's. I used to work there at one point, which is why I kind of bring it up. The next thing is that Amazon's long-awaited game New World is now out. Honestly, folks, I'm trying to get back into gaming because I want to really get that Twitch streaming back up. So, back up. It never really started per se, but I really wanted to get it going a handful of months ago. I have all the equipment and tools, the capture cards and all that. So let me know what you think, if any of you gamers are watching or listening to this, if it's worth it. The next thing is that the latest James Bond movie that came out, and I believe it's Daniel Craig's final film pertaining to the Bond franchise, is apparently extremely, extremely well done. Story, action, visuals, you name it. I'm looking forward to it. The next thing is that prices of gas futures in Europe continue to rise sharply and just hit $1,064 per 1,000 cubic meters, a new all-time high. Well, again, what can we say? This is, we know how the system works, and this is part of it. The next thing is that President Kais Saied appoints Najla Budin Ramdan, excuse me if I butchered her name, my apologies, as the new prime minister nearly 2 months after his power grab. Depends how it's viewed. I know that some people might be saying, okay, Dave, you have no idea what of Tunisian internal politics and affairs and all that. You're right, I don't, which is why I'm saying we got to look at all the angles here. As someone, such as myself, that doesn't know the full extent and gravity of the situation, it's speculative, right? But here's the thing. Unless there's an imminent coup that's about to take place, she seems to be in power at the moment, right? I'm not saying too bad for the people if they don't want it. I'm just saying that at the moment, unless something happens in a relatively short period of time, The next thing is that Syria is high on the agenda for Putin as he and Erdogan meet in Sochi. Russian and Turkish leaders discuss Syria, security issues, and economic links at first in-person meeting after 18 months. Sure. The relationship is interesting between Erdogan and Putin. I'll be honest, I don't want to say Erdogan is up to par with Putin, but at the same time, I'm not trying to make Putin to be like this master strategist all the time, right? He's made mistakes before. But again, perception is reality, right? Which is why a lot of people don't realize. With that being said, I would like to be a fly on the wall in the off the record or backroom conversations. That would be interesting to see. The next thing is that the Beirut blast survivors are protesting against the suspension of the probe. Protesters are condemning Lebanese officials for attempting to remove the lead investigator, Judge Tarek Bitar, from the probe. Again, this is how you demonstrate what you want in large numbers, by protesting, and rightfully so. Let's see if the government's going to listen. We'll follow up on that. The next thing is that a Pakistani soldier was killed in a cross-border fire from Iran, according to the army. Quote-unquote terrorists, end quote, attacked a post from Iranian territory, killing one soldier and injuring another, Pakistan's military said. I'm going to be honest with you, folks. I believe some of you may, in fact, or probably do know much better of the Pakistan and Iranian ties relatively recently. I haven't been up to date on them, to be quite honest with you. I've sort of tried to keep my finger on the pulse, but there's been just so much going on with making the other content and all that I haven't been able to keep up to date in terms of relative news on that and recent news. So, these things, again, I'm not trying to brush it off. These things do happen. With that being said, Pakistan and Iran, again, not the people, the regime. These are both countries that are very difficult to trust, and there's a track record that shows that. But again, we could also argue that that track record was something told to them by the CIA as part of an overarching agenda. So, you know, we got to question it all, right? The next thing is that Jordan fully reopens their main crossing with Syria, and Jordanian officials have urged the U.S. to ease sanctions on Syria in efforts to boost cross-border trade. Yeah, the U.S. sanctions are, in my opinion, nowadays, they're just another form of imperialism. Again, it's like if the U.S. doesn't want, Russian oligarchs or you name it, other influential, wealthy individuals around the world, whether public or private citizens, to do business with certain U.S. businesses, the feds of the U.S. they just freaking slap a sanction on. I mean, some people might say, Dave, it's not that simple. In some cases, it seems to have been, folks. I could be wrong, but in some cases, it seems to have been. I'm not saying get rid of all the sanctions. But then again, it comes back to this sort of debate: should the U.S. even be the moral arbiter of the world, or should who? Why are they in so many countries? An empire. We can argue this is like the Roman Empire, and this, and so hard to say. The next thing is that U.S. passes a bill enabling sanctions on foreign actors in Libya. Legislation would sanction foreign actors backing rival Libyan factions loyal to forces in either Tobruk or Tripoli. The reason I sigh, folks, is not because I'm for this nor against this. I don't think they should be getting involved. I really don't. I mean, if you're going to do it covertly, just like the other countries do, I don't believe other countries have the ability to slap these type of sanctions on people like the U.S. does, right? The next thing is that 5 Sudanese security forces were killed in a raid targeting an ISIL or ISIS cell. Security forces arrested 11 foreign terrorists from different nationalities in the raid, intelligence services say. Look, I'll be honest. I know that there's constant back and forth in terms of, certain intelligence agencies around the world staging certain events under the justification of going after terrorism. But presuming this was a legitimate raid or investigation and operation, sting, if you want to call it, I mean, at least they got them. I mean, it's unfortunate to say that there were, security forces killed. With that being said, not to sound like a son of a bitch, but when you sign up for that job, you understand the risks going in, right? With that being said as well, I'm not trying to brush it off as simply that. A human life is a human life. The next thing is that Ethiopia's Tigray crisis, quote, is a stain on our conscience, end quote, according to the UN. UN humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths calls for urgent action to stave off famine in rebel region of Tigray. You know what? Don't get me started. Stain on your conscience, really? You know what should be a stain on your conscience? Oh, don't get me started. You folks know what I can say and what we can all say to just go ramble on and on, so I'm not even going to touch that. But the next thing is that the Guinea military government presents a charter for civilian transition. The document outlines the missions and duties of the transitional government to steer the country back to civilian rule. Assuming this is legit and there's no plan to, screw one another over on the end of the military, on the end of the allegedly new, coalition and things like this. Okay. I mean, if the people are okay with it, I don't know. Again, I don't believe I have the right to speak on this. I do not live there. I have no knowledge of what goes on the ground. So who am I to say, right? By the way, if there are things I'm missing in that story, please feel free to comment and let me know. The next thing is that military leaders in Canada saw the pandemic as a unique opportunity to test propaganda techniques on Canadians, a Canadian Armed Forces report says. You see what I'm saying, folks? You see what I'm surprised? And this was published by an outlet called the National Post. Center conservative, center right-leaning here in Canada. I'm surprised this story even got out, to tell you the truth. I know things, I guess you could say get let through or quote-unquote slip or however you view it every so often. Nothing can ever be fully covered up, but wow. Yeah, wow. And I understand if you bring yourself a little bit down before everybody else, you control the narrative in a much more masterful way in an overarching perspective, right? But the next thing is that Prince Andrew is among the royals to be honored with some like Jubilee Award or something by the Queen. I don't even get me started on that. This guy's getting an award. Pardon my English, for fuck's sakes, he's a pedophile. Like, don't even get me started. Like, is he getting an award for that freaking train crash of an interview he gave 2 years ago? Like, holy crap. The next thing is that Nepal introduces... Sorry, guys, I got to move on from that or else I'm just going to keep ranting about that crap. Nepal introduces others gender category in the latest census. A third gender category for citizenship documents was introduced in 2013. Doesn't bother me. Truthfully, doesn't bother me at all. Again, if If the people are okay with it and they want it, the politicians voted it in, so be it. It's not for me to say. I should not pass judgment, at least in my opinion. The next thing is that the Taliban said there will be quote unquote consequences if U.S. drones enter Afghan airspace. The Taliban has accused the U.S. of violating withdrawal agreements by continuing to fly drones over Afghanistan. Yeah, of course they were. Of course they were. Now, if the Taliban retaliates, it's tit for tat, right? It depends on the perspective one takes. Okay, Afghan army didn't have the heart or, the guts to fight, arguably. That's what they say, at least. And, Taliban took over. It's their country now. There's also speculation the Taliban is sort of not being as strict on what they're going to be doing to women with regards to their schooling and things like this, because they want to have a little more respect on the world stage. So they might get, garner some deals on the UN and stuff like that. And then later on, they'll do the whole thing where they limit the woman's ability to learn, drive, all that stuff. That's, in my opinion, unfortunate. The next thing is that Cathie Wood's ARK investment sells $270 million worth of Tesla stake. ARK sold more than 340,000 shares of Tesla across 3 of its exchange-traded funds. Okay, I mean, people bet against, people bet for Tesla, Elon Musk all the time. I don't think this is, that's quite a big chunk of change. Don't get me wrong. That'll move markets if I'm not mistaken. But, I don't think that's going to tip the scale per se. The next thing, but I could be wrong. The next thing is that the U.S. is set to declare 23 types of birds, fish, and other species extinct. Officials say the move will free up resources for on-the-ground conservation efforts for species that can still be rescued, end quote. Yeah, this should have been done a long time ago. Again, I'm not a tree hugger or, super, environment, climate person, but when it comes to animals, folks, I think many of you who have watched the show for a while now, me on a personal level. I love animals. I got parrots, I have guinea pigs, dogs, cats. I love animals. No animal should be tortured ever, no matter what. This might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I'm just gonna say it because I think a lot of you have gotten to know me. And if you had to make me choose between a human being and an animal, the animal by nature is going to have more of a pure soul. I know not all animals are good or friendly, if you will, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to say the least. And if people are thinking, you guys are thinking, Dave, what do you mean by if you had to choose? Not relationship. I'm saying more like I don't want to use this example because it's a bit extreme, but I'll use it from an old friend of the family of ours saying, if I had a choice of running over a human or an animal, I would run over the human because guaranteed they've done some shit in their life, right? An animal, what have they done, right? Sorry, I was a little hesitant to share that example, but whatever. The next thing, is that United Airlines says nearly 600 staff face termination for vaccine refusal. The mandate that all domestic employees in the U.S. be vaccinated against COVID-19 kicked in on Tuesday. Look, they're a private company, but I also do agree in a certain sense with there being some form of regulation. But again, we see the Biden administration is advocating for this too. So when you see, I have to be honest, in this individualistic sense, I have to agree with President Putin when he said, no one should wake up in the morning fearing they're going to lose their job because they don't want to take the vaccine. He said that's not going to happen in Russia. Let's see if he follows through, but I'm pretty sure he will. When he says things, they usually end up happening. The next thing is that Activision Blizzard, the company, is set to create an $18 million fund after harassment lawsuits surfaced. The gaming company said it would create an $18 million fund to compensate people who were harassed for discriminated against. Okay, it's a slush fund. It's a slush fund, basically. It's a very formal version of a slush fund, essentially. The next thing is that OPEC says oil will remain number one despite green energy push. The latest World Oil Outlook warns that failure to keep investing in fossil fuels could risk geopolitical instability. I agree. I do agree with that from a business level. From the perspective of, the grand scheme of things, it's just they want the power structure to remain the same. Again, you bring in free energy, you could do it tonight. They could within, I think, a matter of honestly minutes. Okay, let's say hours. They could put free energy and emit it all over the world, but it's not going to happen. So not that I agree with OPEC, but I understand what they're saying. It doesn't mean that it's the right way to go, though. The next thing is that Sidney Powell and Powell and Yellen of the U.S. Fed of the Federal Reserve Chair and Treasury Secretary, Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen warn of, quote, devastating impact of U.S. debt default. They testified before senators on Tuesday, which was, I believe, was that? Yeah, that was yesterday. Sorry, folks, been up late. And yeah, lots of stuff going on. But again, could be part of the game. I mean, it could be a legitimate thing with respects to, I mean, you look at the numbers, right? But it's all, I still believe it's all a show to many different, at many different levels. The next thing is that elections must be held as soon as possible, the Prime Minister of Haiti has said. In an interview with the Associated Press, Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry says he also plans a referendum. Okay, I mean, let's see what happens. Let's see what comes of it. Again, he's been elected, and we will see what goes on there. The next thing is that a U.S. judge approves extradition of ex-Peruvian President Toledo. Alejandro Toledo faces corruption charges in his home country in relation to the Odebrecht scandal. Yeah, I mean, of course, the U.S. will extradite. I mean, let's look at it like this. The way I see it is that there was some behind-the-scenes, under-the-table talks. Peru, U.S., CIA, whatever, you want NSA, whatever. They have a quick meeting. Okay, you're going to do this for us. We'll extradite him, all good. Usually that's how I would imagine it would go. But I'm just speculating. The next thing is that Chile takes its first step towards decriminalizing abortion. The proposed bill to legalize abortion up to 14 weeks, hailed by Chilean legislator as tremendous step for women's rights. Again, not for me to say. I live in Canada. From a personal opinion, a personal perspective, not my country, and I say that in a respectful way in the sense that I'm not on the ground there. I don't think I should be judging in terms of this. I know it's a very touchy subject, to tell you the truth. With that being said, if the people in that particular nation want this and the leaders are okay with it, folks, I'm torn on this abortion thing, by the way. Telling you the truth at a personal level. The next thing is that Slovenia has suspended the Johnson & Johnson vaccine over the death of a 20-year-old. Officials say the woman's death was a second serious case of adverse effects, but reassures benefits outweigh risks. Right. Again, I just don't want to, for a number of reasons, in my opinion, I just don't want to be one of the guys that gets this happens to. Maybe not death, but you see these videos all over the internet, people shaking, and nurses are there at their home trying to help them, The next thing is that North Korea says that it tested a hypersonic. Well, sorry, by the way, for the record, I'm saying that at the surface level. There's many other reasons why I personally will not be getting the boop bop. But the next thing is that North Korea says that it tested a hypersonic missile. Pyongyang has been developing its arsenal with denuclearization talks stalled since 2019. Yeah, let them do it. In my opinion, it's a show. It's a show. And this whole threat of nuclear war, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't. I mean, knock on wood. I don't mean to, just brush it off and say, oh, it's nothing. It's a show at many different facets and levels. The next thing is that, quote, unprecedented, end quote, power cuts in China have hit homes and factories. Northeastern China is experiencing power cuts because of coal shortages and the tightening of emission standards. Again, free energy could solve all this. So until then, it's the same old BS. We got to get emission standards, So the next thing is that Bangkok is on alert as deadly floods hit a third of Thailand. The barriers set up to protect Bangkok as severe flooding kills 6 and affects about 70,000 homes in Thailand. The thing, okay, I'm very on the fence about, this weather stuff being controlled and curated by world governments and at a very, very secretive level for maybe depopulation to help push a mass agenda in order to now direct mass consciousness to something that we are yet to understand or know what the end result will be relative to the dissemination of what they're trying to push. Hard to say. But ultimately, I mean, again, to bring it back to climate change, do I think we should take better care of the environment? Absolutely. But does that also mean that I think, we should, what's going on right now, we're damaging so many things? I don't think nearly as much as they say, but, just my opinion. And when I mean they, I'm referring to the mainstream media. The next thing is, the final thing, is that Japan is set to lift COVID state of emergency as cases drop. Japan's COVID emergency, one of the longest in the world, is set to be lifted in a bid to reactivate its economy. Great. Again, their country, their choice. Again, if I'm not, I got to be careful saying this, but that other drug that, people are saying, well, mainstream media is saying is a horse dewormer, but starts with an I, that won the Nobel Prize in 2015, I believe. for humans, I think. Anyways, apparently that was being handed out, and that was highly recommended by some Japanese officials. Not enforced, not regulated, not endorsed, but recommended. But then again, the media covered that up quite quickly. You can still find articles on it, but you got to dig. So with that being said, folks, thank you all so much for your understanding and all that with respects to us taking a very, very quick, short breather. We may, if we get some good rest tonight, then we'll be right back at it. But just to let you know, there will still be a Kraken tomorrow regardless. It's just a matter of the rest of the content. Again, for the members, we just put out an early release, and we just put out a members-only episode. So with that being said, we'll catch all of you very soon. Cheers.